Have you ever imagined what life was like in the magnificent Temple of Solomon, a place of unmatched grandeur, mystery, and divine wisdom? But what if I told you that behind the temple's majestic walls, a hidden world of intrigue, luxury, and unspoken power lay in wait? Solomon, known as the wisest king in history, managed not only to rule a vast kingdom, but to juggle the affections and demands of 700 royal wives and 300 concubines. Can you even begin to fathom how a man could divide his time and heart among 1,000 women each day? The women in his palace underwent elaborate preparations for their potential night with the king. They bathed in waters infused with rare fragrances. Their skin was massaged with precious oils like myrrh and aloe. Their hair was braided with strands of pure gold, and their bodies adorned with jewels designed to captivate and enchant. The air itself seemed to carry the weight of mysticism, filled with the scent of exotic perfumes, while sacred rituals and mesmerizing dances unfolded each night. But this wasn't just about indulgence and beauty. It was a fierce, unspoken competition, a battle for Solomon's favor where women vied for more than just his attention. This vast harem operated under an almost supernatural energy. But what if there's more to the story than mere luxury and politics? What if Solomon's reign was entwined with something darker, something beyond earthly understanding? You're about to uncover secrets that have remained hidden for centuries, and at the heart of it all lies a shocking revelations. Something Solomon kept under his control with the power of a legendary ring. What was the true cost of such unmatched power and wisdom? Stay with me until the end, because this story will transform everything you thought you knew about the greatest king in history. If you're ready to dive into the mysteries of Solomon's temple and uncover secrets that have been hidden for thousands of years, drop a 777 in the comments below. Let's unravel this story together. What life was like in Solomon's temple. How Solomon managed 1,000 wives. Imagine yourself in the year 957 BC. The sun rising over the city of Jerusalem paints a scene beyond belief. There, towering over Mount Moriah, stands a structure like no other, a marvel of both architectural wonder and divine significance. Solomon's temple was not simply a building. It was the very embodiment of faith, strength, and the glory of a kingdom, crafted with resources that by today's standards would be worth billions of dollars. Its radiant golden walls shimmered as the first light of the day hit, casting a celestial glow upon the land. This was not just a place of worship. It was a monument that declared the unrivaled power and divine favor of Solomon. For 7 continuous years, more than 180,000 laborers worked tirelessly to bring this grand vision to life. From faraway lands, massive caravans transported Lebanon's finest cedar wood, an offering of the highest quality from the ancient world. Skilled Phoenician artisans, renowned for their unparalleled craftsmanship, carved every intricate detail of the temple with precision so exact it could almost be described as divine. The rhythmic sound of hammers and chisels resonated day and night as massive stone blocks were carefully shaped into pieces of art, showcasing engineering skills that still baffle modern minds. The temple's size was imposing, 98 feet long, 33 feet wide, and 49 feet high in the main sanctuary. But it was the interior that left visitors speechless. Every surface gleamed with pure gold, as though the very walls were soaked in the light of heaven itself. The overwhelming gleam of the sacred metal ensured that no eye could rest, consumed by the constant shine. At the heart of the Holy of Holies stood colossal cherubim, carved from olive wood and covered in gold. Their wings stretched wide in solemn protection. The air within this chamber was thick with reverence, an atmosphere so charged with holiness that it whispered of divine presence. The priest's courtyard, a place of sacred activity, was paved with precious stones, each one holding its own story and journey from distant lands. At the temple's entrance, two towering pillars, Zukin and Boaz, stood proudly, their massive forms representing strength and stability. Adorned with bronze pomegranates and intricate chains, they symbolized the eternal strength of Solomon's reign. But perhaps the most awe-inspiring element of the temple lay within its sacred heart, the Holy of Holies. This chamber, a perfect cube measuring 10 meters on each side, housed the Ark of the Covenant. Only the high priest was allowed to enter this hallowed space, and only once a year on the Day of Atonement, making it the holiest of all places. The room was filled with the scent of incense mingling with the fresh aroma of cedar, creating an unforgettable sensory experience for anyone allowed near this divine sanctuary. to ensure that this sacred place would function without ceasing. Solomon instituted a remarkable system, a rotating cycle of 24 priestly divisions, each taking turns to maintain the temple's sacred duties, from replenishing the showbread each Sabbath to keeping the golden lamps burning day and night. The temple's needs were met with precision and devotion. But this was only the beginning of Solomon's reign as a spiritual leader. As we journey deeper into Solomon's world, you'll soon discover the secret forces he wielded, forces that went beyond mere wisdom. The king, known for his supernatural insight, summoned powers to keep dark, demonic entities at bay. But that wasn't the only secret he kept behind closed doors. The palace itself harbored rituals that were known only to his 1,000 wives. Rituals that veiled the true depth of Solomon's spiritual reach. And beyond that, hidden practices flourished far from the public eye, in the very heart of his kingdom. How did Solomon, the wisest king in history, manage to control the supernatural? And what was the cost of wielding such power? Stay with us as we uncover the mysterious and mystical layers of Solomon's reign, where the divine and the occult intertwined, shaping an empire that still echoes through history. At the first light of dawn, even before the sun's rays could kiss the golden walls of Solomon's temple, a symphony of sound filled the enrich note charged with divine purpose. The thunderous clanging of the bronze gates echoed through the sacred halls, marking the beginning of another day in the temple's sacred service. The Levites, divided into groups with specific tasks, moved with an almost military precision, their devotion and discipline evident in every step. The first act of the day was ritual cleansing, a sacred tradition as vital as the sacrifices themselves. Picture hundreds of servants moving with perfect harmony. Some carried golden jars, each filled with water drawn from the sacred springs, while others swept the courtyards with consecrated brooms, ensuring every corner of the temple was prepared for the holy rituals ahead. The marble floors were so meticulously polished that it was said you could gaze into them and see not just your reflection but the reflection of your very soul. The purity of the space beneath your feet mirroring the purity of your spirit. As the temple's sacred preparation continued, the temple musicians, trained Levites who had devoted their lives to the art, began to take their positions in the courtyards. Their harps, cymbals, and trumpets began to play, sending celestial melodies into the morning air. These were no ordinary tunes. Each song had been selected according to instructions given by King David himself. Each melody was assigned to specific moments throughout the day, evoking a spiritual atmosphere that could be felt beyond the walls of Jerusalem, reaching even the heavens themselves. Meanwhile, in the outer courts, merchants offered animals for sacrifice. But this was no ordinary marketplace. Each animal was carefully inspected by the priests to ensure that only those without blemish would be deemed worthy to be offered to God. Prices were set with careful thought, so that even the poorest among the people could participate in the sacred rituals. It was not just a marketplace, it was a place where the divine and the mundane met, where everyone, regardless of their wealth, could draw closer to God. A marvel of ancient engineering was quietly at work behind the scenes, a complex aqueduct system that ensured a constant flow of water to the temple. Water was not just for cleaning, it was essential for purification rituals, a symbol of spiritual renewal. One of the most awe-inspiring features was the immense bronze sea supported by 12 massive bronze oxen. This reservoir of water was a sacred tool for the priests, holding the water needed for purification and various other daily rituals that ensured the temple remained a place of holiness. Before any sacred service could commence, the priests themselves underwent a meticulous purification process. They donned fine linen garments stored in chambers dedicated solely to this sacred purpose. Each article of clothing was not just a garment, it was a symbol of divine meaning. Its placement in the correct order carried with it a deep spiritual significance. The priests' preparations were not merely physical. Each garment was an integral part of their spiritual alignment, a way to sanctify both their body and spirit. In preparation for the divine service they were about to undertake, behind the grand structure of the temple, the bustling activity of a city in itself unfolded. Bakers specially chosen for their skill and devotion prepared the showbread in sacred ovens, following an ancient recipe passed down through the generations. The bread, considered a sacred offering, had to be made with the utmost reverence and care. Meanwhile, perfumers, equally devoted, blended the holy incense. The formula for this incense was a closely guarded secret, as closely protected as the temple's own treasures, and it would fill the air with a fragrance so divine it was said to carry the prayers of the people to God. Each aspect of the temple, from the sacred music to the intricate rituals, was a part of a divine system designed to ensure that God's presence remained among the people of Israel. It was a place where the holy and the earthly were intertwined, a space that operated not just on the physical plane but in the realm of the divine, inviting all who entered to be transformed by its power. As the day unfolded, each sound, each action, each prayer was a part of a greater divine symphony, a reflection of the glory and splendor of Solomon's temple, where God himself was worshipped in his people. Through their devotion, found themselves drawn ever closer to the divine. But behind this sacred order, there were secrets, mysteries within mysteries that only the most initiated would ever fully comprehend. What rituals, what supernatural forces were at play in this most sacred of places? What was the true cost of such power? The answers, hidden beneath layers of sanctity and divine power, would only be revealed to those who dared to look deeper. In this video, ULL uncover the hidden truth about Solomon's mastery over supernatural forces, using the power of a magical ring that gave him dominion over beings beyond this world. ULL also delve into the forbidden rituals within his palace, the seductive practices that turned the harem into not just a place of pleasure, but a nexus of political power that would shift the course of history forever. What you're about to hear about the greatest monarch of antiquity, King Solomon, will unveil secrets that few have dared to speak of. Our tale woven with power, desire, and consequences that continue to echo through the ages. Picture a palace so vast it could comfortably house 1,000 women, each with her own quarters, her own servants, and, most importantly, her own rituals. This was no mere collection of royal wives. It was a grand design of power and diplomacy. Solomon's harem was far more than a den of luxury and indulgence. It was a center of political maneuvering, where alliances were formed, treaties were forged, and the fate of entire nations was decided. Among these women, Solomon's royal wives and his 300 concubines served not only as his companions but as strategic partners, each representing a connection to distant kingdoms. These were alliances formed, not from love, but from the very pulse of politics and empire. At the pinnacle of this complex harem hierarchy sat the daughter of Pharaoh, whose position was the most prestigious of them all. Her palace, an exquisite structure of its own, stood apart, lavishly adorned with Egyptian hieroglyphs and furnished with treasures from the Nile. Her entourage consisted of hundreds of servants, dancers, and musicians from Egypt, all dedicated to maintaining the grandeur of her position. Her garments, crafted from linen, so fine it was said to be as transparent as water, signified not only her royal status, but also her unique and unassailable power. As you explore this harem, you'll discover the influence of the other women from distant lands, the princesses of Moab, known for their exotic fragrances and a deep understanding of aromatics. The women of Sidon, skilled in weaving royal purple, a color reserved for the wealthiest and most powerful. This was a place where culture, tradition, and beauty from all corners of the ancient world converged. Solomon's harem became a living testament to the unity and diversity of his reign, blending the finest traditions and creations from the furthest reaches of his empire. It was not simply a luxury retreat, but a miniature kingdom in its own right, with its own intricate hierarchy and protocol. The royal wives resided in the upper levels of the harem, luxurious pavilions overlooking perfumed gardens, living lives of opulence and grandeur. Below them, the concubines, though well taken care of, lived in more modest quarters. Even here in the lower levels, comfort was ensured. Solomon spared no expense when it came to the welfare of his women. Each of the women in the harem held a royal seal and emblem of power that allowed them to engage in business, maintain correspondence with their homelands, and uphold the alliances of their respective kingdoms. Scribes, appointed to meticulously record the names, lineages, dowries, gifts exchanged, and, most importantly, the children born from these unions, ensured that nothing went unnoticed in the grand scheme of Solomon's political and dynastic effort. The administration of the harem was a system so intricate it could rival the workings of an empire. A veritable army of stewards, guards, cooks, musicians, doctors, and midwives supported the daily life of the harem. Everything was done with a precision that reflected the king's exacting standards. The rules strictly followed to maintain order. The routine of life was coordinated by messengers, usually elderly women of great respect, who were trusted to manage communication and relations between the various sectors of the harem. But even within this well-ordered system, Solomon knew that power could be fleeting. To prevent alliances from forming behind his back, no wife could visit another without prior permission. This rule was not merely about maintaining harmony, it was a measure to prevent conspiracies, to keep the potential for dangerous alliances at bay, and to ensure that every decision made in the harem worked in Solomon's favor. Such was the complexity and intrigue of Solomon's world. Nothing was left to chance. What you are about to uncover in this story unveils the most intimate secrets of Solomon's palace, a place where beauty, power, and desire danced together in an eternal celebration. Every night within those walls was a unique and sacred ritual, a constant exchange of love, loyalty, and ambition. Solomon's harem was far more than a place of sensual pleasure. It was the pulse of his kingdom, the center from which the strings of fate were pulled, and a testament to the king's ability to balance wisdom with the complexities of human nature. The rituals for a night with the king began with the first light of dawn. The chosen woman, her identity shrouded in secrecy, was announced in whispers by a messenger. This marked the start of a day-long procession, elaborate ceremony that was both an art and a sacred tradition, one that few would ever witness in its entirety. She was first escorted to the House of Purifications, a building reserved exclusively for this sacred beautification ritual. This space was not merely a chamber, it was a temple in itself, dedicated to preparing the woman for her night with the king. Inside, she would bathe in 7 different pools, each filled with water infused with specific aromatic oils, myrrh, aloe, cassia, and cinnamon, scents that had been passed down through generations of harem guardians. These oils were chosen for their power to cleanse and purify, to prepare both body and spirit for the king's presence. 7 personal handmaidens, each with a task as intricate as the next, attended to her every need. Their delicate hands washed her hair with rare essences, styling it with ivory combs inlaid with precious stones. Her skin was treated with a luxurious blend of honey, goat's milk, and secret oils, a recipe so ancient and sacred it was kept hidden within the inner circles of the palace, protected by centuries of tradition. It was said that those who bathed in these oils would emerge, just physically transformed but spiritually imbued with an almost divine aura. Her nails, carefully manicured, were painted with henna in intricate symbolic designs. Each design told a story of love, written in an ancient script known only to those who belonged to the palace. These symbols were not merely for beauty, they were a language of seduction, telling tales of desire and devotion that echoed through the corridors of time. The garments chosen for the night were selected with equal care, fabrics so fine they appeared to have been spun by the hands of gods, dyed with pigments extracted from shells and precious minerals. These were no ordinary clothes, they were works of art, crafted to evoke both beauty and power. Each garment held meaning, designed to symbolize the woman's status and allure in the eyes of the king. Jewelry, too, played its part. More than just adornments, each piece was imbued with symbolic meaning, representing both her beauty and the seductive power she wielded. Necklaces, bracelets, and rings each studded with gems that captured the light, in such a way that they seemed to glow with their own inner firework carefully placed upon her. As the woman was prepared, the royal chamber was also set with equal precision. Golden censers filled with aromatic incense spread a captivating fragrance throughout the room, its sweet and intoxicating scent filling the air. Flower petals picked fresh from the palace, gardens were scattered across silk sheets, creating a scene of beauty that was both tranquil and sensual. Small oil lamps, carefully arranged, cast a soft flickering glow. Their light danced like whispers in the dark, setting the perfect mood for what was to come. In adjoining rooms, musicians specially trained in the art of love songs positioned themselves discreetly, ready to play. Their harps and flutes filled the air with gentle melodies, each note inspired by the Song of Songs. The ancient text was as sweet as honey and filled with the promise of romance and mystery. These songs, sacred and sensual, served to elevate the moment, enhancing the intimacy of the night. Before the woman was allowed to enter the king's presence, she was instructed in the arts of love by experienced elders, wise women, who had spent their lives passing down secrets that had been carefully guarded for generations. Every gesture, every word, every movement was rehearsed and perfected, ensuring that the night would be unforgettable, a night where beauty and power intertwined with ancient wisdom. But what you're about to learn goes far deeper than the rituals of beauty and love. Solomon, the wisest king to ever reign, wielded more than just power over his harem. He had dominion over forces unseen, supernatural powers that allowed him to command demons, bend the elements, and protect his kingdom from spiritual threats. You will discover the secret rituals practiced not only by his wives, but by Solomon himself in the hidden chambers of the palace. The mysteries of his court went far beyond what the people could see, far beyond the glittering gold and sacred rituals. What happened in the deepest corners of Solomon's palace was a world of its own, where forbidden practices and mystical forces worked together to shape the destiny of a kingdom. Get ready for revelations that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the wisest monarch in history. The Song of Songs echoed through the corridors of Solomon's palace, its verses so rich in passion and divine love that it was elevated to the level of Holy Scripture. In these sacred lines, Solomon revealed a profound vision of love, one that transcended mere physicality, intertwining the human with the divine. The love he described was not just a reflection of the heart's desires, but a mirror of the divine affection, where earthly passion became a sacred expression of God's love for his people. The women who filled Solomon's harem were not mere companions. They were emissaries of their distant lands, each bringing with her the deep sensual traditions of her culture. The Egyptian women, with their sinuous movements and allure, had mastered the art of belly dancing. They moved as if they were one with the earth, their bodies undulating like serpents. Their dance, an intoxicating ritual that could stir even the most composed of souls. The golden cymbals they played provided a backdrop for their movements, the sound as haunting and mesmerizing as the dance itself. The Phoenician women were the alchemists of scent. Perfume was their magic. With skill and precision, they crafted intoxicating oils and fragrances that could enchant the senses, captivating anyone who breathed them in. Their perfumes were not just smells but gateways to another world, filled with mystery, beauty, and deep longing. They could weave spells with a mere drop of their fragrant concoctions, making the air itself thick with desire. The Moabite women, on the other hand, were the heart of the harem's music. Their love songs, soft yet powerful, carried a melody so pure it could melt the hardest of hearts. Each note was a prayer, each word an offering of devotion. When they sang, time seemed to stand still, and all who heard them were drawn into the powerful pull of their melodies, their voices. A reminder of love's sweetest and most tender expressions. At the very heart of the palace, secret gardens flourished under the shade of pomegranate trees and vineyards, paths winding through them with murmuring fountains as their soundtrack. It was here, amid this paradise, that the women would gather not as rivals, but as a sisterhood, sharing their wisdom and secrets. They taught one another ancient recipes made from aromatic herbs, passed down through generations, that had the power to heal, to seduce, and to transform. Dance, too, was a part of their education, with movements so hypnotic they could entrance anyone who watched. And of course, they shared the subtler artster, seductive charm of conversation, where every word and glance held the potential to sway hearts and minds. Each woman brought her own vision of beauty and pleasure, and in this harem, the blending of cultures created a vibrant tapestry of sensuality and grace. The bonds between the women were as complex as the court they inhabited, where each sought to master the art of love and beauty in her own way, while learning from the others. Special musical instruments, crafted specifically for the rituals of love, were reserved for the most intimate moments. Delicate harps, their strings woven from silk threads, produced sounds that whispered like soft caresses. Drums, their rhythms deep and resonant, echoed through the night like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Flutes, with notes that rose like passionate sighs, played melodies that seemed to speak directly to the soul. Music was not merely entertainment in Solomon's palace. It was a form of magic, a key that unlocked the deepest chambers of the heart, a tool that could summon emotions both sweet and powerful. But even as beauty and harmony filled the air, there was an undercurrent of rivalry, one that was fierce, silent, and ever-present. Solomon, the wisest of kings, was the object of intense competition among the women of Israel. It was no ordinary competition. It was a battle for more than affection. It was a game of power, desire, and influence. Every gesture, every smile, every glance was loaded with meaning. What you're about to discover within Solomon's harem reveals a world of intrigue, where the rivalry for the king's attention was not just about love. It was about shaping the fate of nations influencing the king's decisions and securing a place in the history of Israel. The women of the harem played a silent yet powerful game. They knew that the favor of Solomon was not just about beauty or grace. It was about influence, intelligence, and the ability to manipulate the delicate web of politics and desire. What seemed like a peaceful harem was, in truth, a complex and dangerous battleground where the stakes were nothing less than the future of the kingdom itself. Within the vast and opulent harem of Solomon, each woman knew that the king's favor was the key to her power, and she would stop at nothing to win it. But capturing Solomon's gaze was no simple task. Some women relied on their intellect, joining private discussions on matters of politics, philosophy, and governance, subtly impressing the king with their sharp minds and ability to understand the complexities of his reign. These women knew that true influence came not only from beauty, but also from the power of wisdom. They skillfully participated in conversations, offering solutions to problems Solomon faced, and in doing so, they gained a place in the king's confidence. Others took a different route. They nurtured their artistic talents, composing poetry that would touch the king's heart, crafting exotic fragrances that captured his senses, or perfecting dances that moved with such grace that they seemed almost otherworldly. These performances were more than just entertainment. They were a form of communication. Each gesture, each movement, each note in the music was laced with a message of longing and devotion. Solomon, known for his wisdom, understood that the language of art was as powerful as the spoken word. Yet beneath this air of grace and beauty, the competition was fierce and quiet. It was a ruthless game, one where alliances were forged in the shadows. Women from different nations, each bringing their own culture, traditions, and powers, would unite in secret, weaving networks of influence that extended far beyond the walls of the palace. A cunning concubine could rise in status quickly, gaining favor by aligning herself with the more powerful royal wives who had access to the king's inner circle. These alliances were delicate and fragile, built on mutual trust, ambition, and the ever-present hope that the king's favor would one day be theirs. Even the servants, often seen as mere attendants, played pivotal roles in this game of power. They were the silent watchers, the ones who moved unnoticed through the corridors, carrying secret messages between the women, observing the king's actions, and reporting back to them. A carefully timed whisper, a well-placed compliment, or a casual remark could change the course of a woman's destiny. In the harem, the servants were the eyes and ears of the palace, and their loyalty was just as crucial as that of the women they served. Gifts exchanged between the women and the king, or between the women themselves, carried hidden meanings, subtle messages that spoke of power, affection, or desire. A cup of spiced wine offered at the right moment could be a signal of allegiance or a silent act of seduction. A poem inscribed on scented papyrus could convey feelings of love or rivalry, while a jewel marked with mysterious symbols could represent a promise or a threat. These gifts were not just tokens, they were pieces of a secret language, one that only those truly embedded in the haremess world could understand. The wisest women of the harem knew that beauty alone could not secure Solomon's heart or his power. They understood that to truly influence the king, they had to master more than just their appearance. They studied him, they watched his every move, learned his likes and dislikes, understood the challenges he faced in governing the kingdom, and became attuned to his moods and habits. Some women even became informal advisors to the king, offering counsel during the quiet moments of intimacy when Solomon's guard was down. These women shaped decisions, influencing the course of events, not with loud proclamations, but with soft words whispered at the right time. But this quiet manipulation came at a cost. As the women vied for power, the kingdom itself began to change. Solomon's children, born of these alliances, would carry the consequences of this delicate balance of love and power. It was in these very children that the seeds of the kingdom's decline were sown. As Solomon aged, the careful web of influence and desire that had kept his reign steady began to unravel. The story of Solomon's heirs is a story of ambition, betrayal, and a kingdom on the brink of collapse. The events that followed would alter the course of sacred history, leaving a legacy that would echo through the ages. What you're about to discover about Solomon's children marks the beginning of the end for the greatest kingdom Israel had ever known, a kingdom shaped by love, power, and far-reaching consequences. These were the events that would ultimately lead to the kingdom's fracture, changing the very destiny of the people of Israel forever. Despite the grandeur of Solomon's harem, which boasted 1,000 women. The Bible records the birth of only one legitimate son, Rehoboam, born to Naamah the Ammon. But scholars believe that the reality was far more complex, with dozens of princes and princesses born within the royal harem. Each birth was not just a personal or familial event. It was a calculated political move and act that sealed alliances with distant kingdoms and ensured the creation of multiple lines of succession within the palace. These children were not only heirs to Solomon's throne, but to the kingdoms and peoples their mothers represented. Each royal child grew up in a world entirely their own, an isolated universe, where their every need and desire was catered to, but also where the weight of their royal lineage shaped every moment of their lives. The education of these children was a matter of great importance, one that went beyond just learning the customs of Israel. Tutors from all over the world were brought in, each chosen for their expertise in a specific field. These tutors taught foreign languages, philosophy, and the arts, ensuring that the royal children would be equipped to navigate the complexities of ruling not just over Israel, but over an empire that spanned many cultures. The competition among the mothers was fierce. Each one knew that the education of her child could make or break their future. Mothers vied for the best tutors, knowing that knowledge was power, and with power came influence. The Hebrew teachers, those who adhered to the ancient ways, worked tirelessly to instill in the royal children the law of Moses, ensuring that the traditions of Israel were preserved within the palace. Meanwhile, foreign masters introduced their own cultures, myths, and philosophies. Lessons drawn from the lands of Egypt, Phoenicia, Moab, and beyond. The palace became a melting pot of ideas and traditions, a place where cultures collided, blending the ancient laws of Israel with the exotic wisdom of distant lands. Rehoboam, Solomon's only legitimate heir, grew up torn between these two worlds. Raised in the traditions of Israel, with the Hebrew faith and laws as the foundation of his upbringing, he was simultaneously surrounded by the exotic cultures of his foreign aunts, stepmothers, and half-siblings. His life was one of contrasts between the devout teachings of the Hebrew teachers and the enchanting, often seductive, influences of his foreign lineage. These contrasts would later come to define his reign, with the duality of his upbringing pulling him in opposing directions. It would be this struggle that would eventually lead to the tragic downfall of his kingdom. The figure of the father, Solomon, remained distant throughout much of Rehoboam's childhood. Solomon, burdened by the weight of statecraft and the complexities of managing a harem filled with 1,000 women, was rarely present in the lives of his children. He delegated the responsibility of their upbringing to the mothers and their chosen tutors, leaving the children to be molded according to the desires and ambitions of their mothers. Each mother sought to raise her child in her own image, imbuing them with the values of their own culture, creating divisions and rivalries that were often veiled in silence, but no less potent. These silent factions within the palace would ripple through the royal household, creating an atmosphere of intrigue and competition as each mother hoped to secure a future for her child on the throne. Solomon's reign, built upon wisdom and vast power, was not without its shadows. The complex dynamics within the royal household, filled with multiple lines of succession, divisions of loyalty, and competing factions, would sow the seeds of division that would ultimately unravel the kingdom. Rehoboam, caught between these conflicting worlds, was left with a fractured sense of identity. The future king of Israel was destined to inherit not just a kingdom, but a tangled web of political, familial, and cultural legacies that would shape his reign in ways no one could have foreseen. As time passed, Solomon's harem transformed into more than just a center of political and sensual power. It became a spiritual battlefield. With each foreign wife came not only beauty, influence, and diplomatic alliances, but also the gods of distant lands. The daughter of Pharaoh, with her Grace and Egyptian heritage, worshipped Isis and Osiris in private chambers adorned with intricate hieroglyphs, creating a space where Egyptian deities were honored in sacred rituals. The Sidonian women, with their own customs and traditions, burned incense to Astarte, their sacred goddess of love and war. In hidden corners of the palace, the Moabite wives, under the shroud of moonlight, celebrated secret rituals dedicated to Chemosh, their god of war and sacrifice. At first, Solomon regarded these foreign cults with the tolerance of a diplomat, viewing them as necessary gestures to maintain peace and alliances. His wisdom, vast as it was, led him to see these practices as part of the delicate political fabric he had woven through marriage and diplomacy. But as time wore on, a different temptation arose. Solomon, a man of deep intellect and boundless curiosity, found himself increasingly drawn into these foreign rituals, seduced not just by the love he had for his wives, but by the allure of the mysteries they offered. What began as passive observation soon became active participation. He built altars to these foreign gods on the hills surrounding Jerusalem, each one more extravagant than the last, as if to challenge the very sovereignty of the God of Israel. The impact of Solomon's actions was devastating, not just spiritually. As their king, Solomon set an example that the people could not ignore. When the people saw their wise and revered ruler participating in these pagan practices, they too began to stray from their ancestral faith. The faithful, the prophets, and the priests cried out against this infidelity, warning of the consequences of abandoning the one true God. Yet their voices were drowned by the sounds of pagan drums and the raucous laughter echoing from the harem. The call to worship Yahweh seemed distant, even irrelevant, as the seductive pool of foreign gods filled the air. At the heart of Israel's kingdom, an invisible war was being waged, a war between the loyalty to the God of Israel and the seductive allure of foreign religions. Even as the magnificent temple of Yahweh stood in solemn glory at the center of Jerusalem, a rival spiritual world began to rise in the shadows. Small pagan shrines, erected to honor the gods of Solomon's wives, sprouted like weeds in the royal palace gardens. Where once the sacred aroma of incense from the temple had filled the air, it now mingled with the profane sense of the secret rituals performed behind closed doors. The spiritual unity of the kingdom was unraveling, torn between the worship of Yahweh and the enticement of foreign deities. Yet this spiritual crisis was only one facet of the growing troubles Solomon faced. Even as Solomon's kingdom appeared strong on the surface, its economy booming, its trade routes thriving, and its cities glittering with gold and seeded, the spiritual decay beneath was eating away at its foundations. The wise king who once knelt in humble reverence before the Ark of the Covenant now bowed at altars built for gods who demanded neither righteousness nor justice, only loyalty purchased through ritual. The prophets, the true watchmen of Israel's soul, spoke with increasing urgency. Men like Ahijah the Shilonite stood apart from the royal court, filled with divine dread, warning that judgment was near. They foresaw what the people did not, that Solomon's tolerance of idolatry was not merely a personal failing, but a covenantal breach that would invite national catastrophe. Their voices were scorned, labeled as radicals or madmen. While the machinery of the state rolled on, Solomon himself became more withdrawn. Once a man of piercing insight and decisive action, he grew indecisive, haunted by dreams and portents. The wisdom that had once dazzled foreign dignitaries began to wane. He wrote Ecclesiastes in this final phase, a book filled with despair, cynicism, and reflections on the futility of human achievement. Vanity of vanities, he wrote, all is vanity. His words were not those of a conqueror, but of a man who had seen the limits of power, knowledge, and love. And yet, even as his heart grew heavy with regret, the wheels of judgment were already turning. The political stability Solomon had so carefully constructed began to show cracks. Revolts brewed on the outskirts of the kingdom. Enemies long subdued began to rise. Jeroboam, a capable official and warrior from the tribe of Ephraim, began to gain favor among the northern tribes. A divine encounter with the prophet Ahijah would change the course of his life and the nation's. Ahijah tore his cloak into 12 pieces and gave 10 to declaring that God would rip the kingdom from Solomon's son and give most of it to this rising leader. Though Solomon attempted to kill Jeroboam, the younger man escaped to Egypt, where he found sanctuary. But the prophecy had already been spoken. The future was set in motion. In his final days, Solomon wandered his palaces like a ghost, surrounded by luxury yet tormented by the knowledge that his spiritual compromises would lead to national division. The great builder of the temple had also, unwittingly, laid the foundation for Israel's downfall. His own son would not inherit a united kingdom, but a broken one. And so it was that the man who had once asked for wisdom to lead his people would die with a heavy heart, realizing that wisdom without obedience leads only to ruin. The golden age of Israel ended not with a foreign invasion, but with a quiet betrayal of faith. Began in the secret chambers of the harem and echoed through the hills of Jerusalem. When Solomon died, he left behind a kingdom rich in treasure but poor in unity, dazzling in architecture but divided in soul. His legacy would forever be a paradox. The wisest of kings, brought low by the seductions of love, power, and idolatry.